2. Liberty and dialectics. All this means that, at the very least, two questions are involved in any discussion of liberty. First, what is true liberty? Liberty not as the accident of a culture, but as an aspect and product of its essence. Second, is liberty worthwhile? The second question is an obvious one, but it needs to be recognized. Liberty is worthwhile only when it has an essential relation to the faith of a culture. A few years ago, Lin Yu-tang called attention to the change in Western culture since Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Those words once electrified men. The only whisper we can hear now is, "Give me security or give me death. Put me in a collectivist jail if you want, but give me a meal ticket and an old age coupon." What a come down for a revolutionist. What an amazing contrast to the hope of man in the 18th century. The question of liberty is thus, in a very real measure, a question of faith. Man's current problem in the economic realm is not that capitalism has failed, but that man has failed. As a result, capitalism, liberty, and individualism all have an unpleasant and distasteful ring to man. Their very success adds to their offence when man himself is a failure. What is it in Western culture that has produced this recurring revulsion for liberty? Why has it been so widely prevalent again in our day? We have cited its repeated abandonments in dialectical cultures. Let us now examine the cultural motives of Western civilization in terms of this concern. The antithesis or dialectic of Greek culture came to be as a result of a long development, the form-matter motive. The differences between Greek philosophers were differences of emphasis. The common presupposition of all was the form-matter motive. Two worlds were thus seen in mixture, but as basically alien to one another. One, the world of nature, or matter, of hard reality and atoms, and the other, the world of form, ideas, universals. The first is given to change and flux. The other is timeless, unchanging, and eternal. Reality, the real world, was thus made up in some fashion of two antithetical and irreconcilable elements. Naive experience might see this all as one world, but theoretical thought understood it as an irrevocably dialectical existence. Accordingly, as theoretical thoughts dealt progressively with this problem, it became progressively aware that its dialectics was destroying rather than undergirding human faith and culture. It tended steadily to denigrate or suppress one or another aspect of this dualistic interpretation of reality. If matter were stressed, then all things were reduced to atoms, all else in reality being dismissed as subjective and illusionary, with consequent cynicism and cultural collapse. If form or ideas were stressed, then mysticism became man's escape from the false world of appearance or matter. Mysticism is always incapable of dealing with the problems of culture because it is a denial of their validity. The great One must absorb all reality, and individuation is an unhealthy separation. Neoplatonic mysticism permeated the Greco-Roman world, and it quickly infiltrated the Church, thinly disguised as Christianity. Thus, Simon Stylites was under constant disapproval as far as the Church was concerned, and his roots were in Neoplatonism and the Atagartis cult. The mystical contempt of the world, however, always has as its counterpart the materialistic contempt of law and meaning as subjective, relative, or irrelevant. Thus, the Cynics who came into prominence in Greece in the 4th century BC and continued to be prominent to the 6th century AD, held that hedonism or happiness was the only true goal for life, and that the wise man, furthermore, sought to decrease his desires as the wiser means of attaining happiness. Cynicism thus fathered Stoicism. The Cyrenaic school differed in that it sought to increase the satisfactions. The name of both schools was derived from Kion, dog, and the name is revelatory. Since law, and with it ethics, had been excluded from the hard work of reality as subjective nonsense, the philosophers of this school often deliberately aped dogs in shamelessness, begging, barking, and biting, and even copulated in public to express their contempt of any philosophy which would exalt man above his animal reality. Man, being an atom in an atomic world, self-sufficiency became his goal, to be independent of any law outside his own desires, and to be wholly dependent on his own inner resources for happiness. Thus, Diogenes of Sinope died shortly after 325 BC, who is well known for his pseudo-search for an honest man, demonstrated these doctrines very vividly. He was independent of housing. He held that the sexual urge was totally natural, and that to seek privacy in its satisfaction, or to be governed by prohibitions, such as that against incest, was unnatural. In our day, Kinsey has classified homosexuality and animal contacts with marital sex as alike normal because natural outlets. Diogenes saw no reason to prefer one woman to another, or if a woman were lacking, he prescribed open and public masturbation as a natural and prophylactic measure, stating that he wished all hungers were equally easy to satisfy. Likewise, Diogenes saw no valid objection to cannibalism. Thus, Diogenes was ready to grant extreme license, and yet, by his contempt of anything destructive of atomism, he was at one and the same time given to fantastic ascetic practices to avoid dependence on others. The difference is not great. Both mysticism and asceticism on the one hand, and materialistic atomism on the other, involve a denial of an aspect of reality and run into both a wild emotionalism and a ready castration of the whole man and his life. Thus, on the one hand, wealth and success were religiously reprehensible and dirty, whereas, on the other, as much later in the French and Russian revolutions and in Nazi thought, culture was a divisive and ugly thing, a pretension as against the hard world of material, political, and economic reality. The reported Nazi statement, "When I hear the word culture, I reach for my revolver," epitomizes the recurring temper of diseased societies. Modern music, art, and literature are at war against culture. The medieval Roman Catholic nature-grace motive retained the dialectical character of Greek thought. The natural world was a realm in itself, knowable by means of autonomous reason, which, while unable to penetrate the mysteries of the supernatural, was still self-sufficient in terms of the natural. Grace thus neither cancelled nature nor superseded it, but rather perfected it, in terms of scholastic thought. In the natural realm, no authority but reason needed to be acknowledged, although it was assumed that nature would not contradict grace. Indeed, it could not, since two separate worlds were involved. Man dwelt in one world as a perishable and material body, and in the other as an ostensibly rational and immortal soul. Here, the Greek form-matter motive is seen in thinly Christianized terminology and form. Again, the same nemesis plagued it. The nominalists simply deny the reality of the universals of the world of grace. The world again relapsed into atomism. If reason were sovereign in its realm, and reason knew nothing of this realm of grace with its law, then reason must conclude that this world of grace and law was not real. And, assuming the reality of the two worlds, what held them together? The result was cynicism and mysticism. Extravagant, mystical, and ascetic practices flourished. Various cults gave license to nudism and sexual promiscuity in the name of the new quote-unquote Christianity. Physical degeneration characterized the man of the late Middle Ages, and medieval historians have estimated that, at Luther's coming, 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe was infected by venereal diseases, then far more virulent than now. Churchmen themselves, often led by popes, gave expression to both radical cynicism and a frenetic immorality. As in the case of Greco-Roman culture, the decline was not without its skyrocketing byproducts, startling but eventually earthbound manifestations of one facet or another. Thus, the Renaissance was dedicated to a materialistic atomism on the one hand and a revival of Neoplatonism on the other. Both were equally sterile in the long run, and the atomism paved the way for the Renaissance tyrant by its destruction of the concept of fundamental law. Restraint was thus removed,